Hey, welcome back to the Rock Fantasy Files on the Rock Fantasy YouTube channel. It's been a week or two since we've been on. I've been doing a bunch of concert footage. Hope you guys enjoy that watching the channel. We're gonna go back and into the 70s and 80s and back in the past a little bit. We're gonna talk about the Boston Bad Boys, Aerosmith, with the recent announcement that they were calling it a day. I think James or one of the guys in the panel mentioned, hey, we should do an episode on them. So I said, yeah, why not? They called it a day. I got a few friends that did actually go see the final tour, and then of course he had the vocal cord problems, and they tried to reschedule, and it didn't happen. So had a couple of local friends, and they called me up one day. Hey, you want to go see Aerosmith? I'm like, nah, I guess not. I should have took the ride, I guess, but I got to see them a lot back in the day. So I've asked the panel tonight to pick their top three albums, or maybe five albums. I think we're going to do three with some honorable mentions, and maybe share some concert memories or Aerosmith stories you have. So tonight's panel, we got Tony Dio here, we got Denny Sasquatch Barth, we got James Delisle, we got Mr. Ed Farsley from Armageddon Productions, and of course the legendary Count Ralphus is in the room tonight. So there's six of us to talk about Aerosmith. I mean, a little bit about Aerosmith with me in the 70s. I'm in my early 60s. So in the 70s, to me, Aerosmith were one of my bands. I literally loved loved them back then. And when the 80s came around, I totally said goodbye. I did not like the commercial sound they had. Yeah, some of the songs were okay as I look back on it. I've got the Aerosmith pinball machine in
Mhm.
my store. It's right up by the counter now, so I get to hear plenty of Aerosmith. So but that's it's just it was one of the top bands I thought in the 70s. And they went way more commercial. Some people could, and probably sold way more records, even though they were huge in the 70s. They were selling out football stadiums in the 70s, but they gained popularity and kept it going for many, many years. And it's sad to see another one of our heroes, one of our classic bands, say goodbye. So we're gonna do this in honor of Aerosmith tonight. And who wants to start off? Danny, do you want to go first?
I can go first. I can go first.
Usually
We
our host or co-host is here tonight, and
Yes, I'm happy that you're doing it. It's nice to have a break and be able to just ride the episode, whatever
good.
that means. But yeah, similar to you, my friend. Like for me, Aerosmith. Like in the '70s, they were just as big as Kiss and Zeppelin and Sabbath and
Yep.
like Joe Perry, you know, and my circle of friend was just as mentioned as Jimmy Page and as Ace Frehley and everybody else. I mean, they were,
Sure.
they were bigger than life, and everything about them were cool. Like they were kind of like a amped up Rolling Stones, just a little bit harder and like they really delivered and represent and wave the American flag. So for us, like every Aerosmith records coming out, everything they would do, we would go see them and follow the band. And they would, often in polls, best drummer, Joey Kramer was showing up, best bass player, Tom Hamilton was showing up, best singer, Steven Tyler. Um, I just had the conversation with one of my friends yesterday, start telling me like, name the top three frontman of all time, and he settled on like Elvis, Freddie Mercury, and Paul Rogers. But then he was like, not far behind. There's guys like Steven Tyler and Robert Plant and Paul Stanley and those guys. So um, yeah, so like they were just like bigger than and they everything they do. There was something like there was a bit of a swagger to their music as well. It was like kind of like a hybrid of like blues and rock and sometimes faster stuff and almost punky to delivery sometimes. So Yeah, like Aerosmith, big band. And they have recorded my favorite all-time record. Uh, so I'll talk about that
Okay.
right
Well, your
now.
all-time favorite
All-time
of
favorite
everything.
records, anything, any band,
Wow.
any genre
Wow.
is an Aerosmith record. So to me, like,
So
and
you're gonna
I got some like like people calling me stupid, whatever. It's
so you're gonna go you're
everybody's
gonna
personal. It's whatever,
so
right?
Denny, you're gonna go 3, 2, 1.
Yeah,
Or
I'll go 3, 2, 1.
okay.
So for number three, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna go with live bootleg. And
Wow.
the reason I'm gonna go with live bootleg is because the version of the song on that record is completely different than anything they've done on the other record. Like if you listen to Toys in the Attic, compare like on live bootleg compared to like the version of it's like it's so it's so amped up. Like I mean, you can almost feel the drugs through the speaker. it's it's uh it's definitely like and all the song like I love that they do Back in the Saddle. It on the record on Rocks, it is like a six-string bass, but on the album, the on live bootleg, they do the riff on the guitar, and all the songs on there. And I like side D or like four, whatever. Like there is like a bunch of like on like there is some covers on there and unreleased material. But I just thought like this entire album really represented well the energy of an Aerosmith concert. And it's always like every time I think about like top live album of all time like UFO, Strangers in the Night, and all those albums like that, Tin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. I always kind of like in the same discussion bring live bootleg. So that's my number three. Number two, I'm gonna go with Night in the Ruts.
Wow.
I don't know why, but like aggression at some point, when like Cactus Feet joined the band and we became a four-piece, like Cactus Feet, aggression singer, with a huge Aerosmith fan, and we started to do like Aerosmith cover, completely like mid-show in a like thrash speed metal freaking punk people stage diving. Then we would play like 3 Mile Smile, like for no reason that we were just a bunch of like crazy. We just do whatever the fuck we want, right? But so that album, like Cheesecake, love that song. Learned that song on slide guitar years ago. Always jam it once in a while. 3 Mile Smile, uh, No Surprise. They have those Yardbirds cover. I think they have two Yardbirds cover on there. Like wow, no, 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 bow, bow, bow. So yeah, like Night in the Ruts, I you know, I think the band was kind of a turmoil at that time, whenever that album was released, and I think Joe Perry and Brad Whitford left like shortly after.
Yes.
Um, but there's a like Reefer Head Woman, like amazing blues song, and just like uh, I find like that album somehow, Night in the Ruts, right in the nuts. It's true, like cheeky, in your face, Aerosmith, like we're a bunch of, we'll go to the bar and if you want to like mess with us, we'll start a fight. We don't care, right? So that's my number two. And then my number one all-time record is this one. Aerosmith rocks. And like, what? I'll be honest with you guys. It's a combination of like moment in time. Like it's a complete reflection of my youth. I can every time I hear a song from that album, and even the obscure one like Get the Let Out or any of these songs, like to me, like Home Tonight, and it brings me back to when I was like 13, 14, 15, my basement, suburb of Montreal, girls that are like a bunch of friends, just like drinking, smoking, whatever, and then just listening to like Back in the Saddle, Last Shot, and Rats in the Cellar combination. Nobody's Fault, uh, like Sick as a Dog, and all those songs like have become like Last Child, and they all have become like kind of like the soundtrack of my youth. So if I listen to the movie Days and Confused, or Everybody Wants Some, any of those two movies, I can actually picture myself in that show, walking around and being
Mhm.
there and listening to these tunes and just doing what they were doing at that time. So rocks, it's not like, like sometimes there might be other albums that I would say, like, like Van Halen 2 as an example, such a close, but that one somehow I can smell, I can smell and feel the scent that where I was when I listened to it for the first time. And when my buddy brought it to my house and we put it on, I never bought the album. He came home with the album, and the album never left my house. so it just always stayed with me. It was just not an option because it's just playing all the time. So that's it. That's my top three Aerosmith records. Like
Cool.
the band was, I love that they were able to adjust. Like I'm not a huge fan of like like Pump and Get a Grip, Terminal Vacation, and that, but I love that they were able to reinvent themselves and make themselves reliable, make themselves like still viable after like the first wave. They had like even the album Nine Lives is very like kind of like heavy and fast for Aerosmith with the combination of obscure song, cool song. So I like that they were able to like they're such good musicians that they were able to do that and adjust themselves to the period. A lot of bands from the 70s were never able to do that. And Aerosmith, with the right producers and they were able to stay relevant, as the word I was looking for, like throughout like the
Definitely.
90s, and then after that, like I think after Just Push Play, then now it started to be a little bit like whatever. But they had a very long career where they were at the top of their game. Um, and it's just like these guys were were bad boys before like any of those like Motley Crue and all those
Oh
guys
yeah.
came on. These guys like they probably were the worst that there was out there when it comes to that type of thing. So that's my selection. Love Aerosmith, and I'll talk about my concert experience when we do second round.
Yeah, we'll wrap around for that.
All right.
Ralph, you look like you're having some technical difficulties. You want to go next just in case we lose you?
Yeah, it seems like I'm popping out and in, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take too long to pop back in. But
All
I'll
right.
try
Well,
to go through them quick. But
take your
my
time.
number three, I got Night in the Ruts.
Well,
A lot of the stuff that um, you know, Denny was saying. A lot of great songs on here. I've read a lot of these Aerosmith books. I read the Steve Tyler book talking about like the craziness of this band and what they've gone through, and then to read Steve Perry's version of everything in his autobiography. And I even read Joey Kramer's book, which I thought was really a shame what ended up happening with him at the end there. Like I couldn't believe that they wouldn't want him being part of it at the end. So it's for him, he's probably happy that everything ended the way it did. But then this is a great, really thick book about just the whole career of Aerosmith up to when this book was written. But this is a really good book, and it talks about all the insanity. But yeah, like he was saying, like you had the Rolling Stones, and then these were like the American version, but it was like for that time more of a hard rock. And I think like kind of Guns N' Roses probably took it like the net was like the next band in that line of this kind of like dirty rock, hard rock. But
mm-hmm.
so my next one, my number two is Toys in the Attic. Just so packed with so many great songs. You know, Walk This Way and Sweet Emotion and Round and Round is one of the best songs they got, I think. 10 inch, Uncle Salty, the title song Toys in the Attic is such
Mm.
a great rocker. just a really good, solid album. Love this album. And my number one is the same as Denny's, is Rocks. I love the flow of this album. Rats in the Cellar, Sick as a Dog, Get the Lead Out, combination, Base Fall, Last Child, Back in the Saddle. One of the heaviest albums, but just such a great flow. I like the production on that album. And it's a classic, you know. But yeah, that's it. I got it done before I faded out again.
You've actually, we can hear you, but you froze for a minute, but there you are again. Cool. I
Oh,
guess we'll go over to Ed Farsley next.
All right. How we doing, guys?
Good
So
to
yeah,
see you.
Aerosmith. That's one of the '70s staple bands. I grew up in the '70s, so Aerosmith was always in the background for me. I wasn't a huge Aerosmith fan. They were just like one of those bands that was always there, always reliable, always good, and everything I ever always heard from them was always cool. I just never really dove into the albums back then. They weren't like my band. I was more like a Cheap Trick, Foreigner, Black Sabbath, AC type of guy. But Aerosmith were just there, and they were always great. A lot of albums. I mean, they've always been, like a few guys have mentioned, just reliable. All the albums they put out, pretty much the first album had a lot more blues on it, and then after by the second album, I think they really just solidified their sound of just a hard rock with a blues edge to it. So with the second album on, they pretty much created their sound, honed it in, and just stuck with it throughout their career. In the '80s, yeah, they definitely got a lot more commercial, a lot more poppy sounding, more airway friendly. But they still had that sound, that crisp musicianship to them, that edge, that bluesy side. They still had that, even though they were popular and selling billions of records. They still had that edge, and it was still good. They were still, viable band throughout the late '80s. Even after that, they definitely dropped off my radar for the most part. Didn't really get into the later albums, song or two here and there, but definitely didn't capture what they used to have. For me, let's see. Number 3 album for me is Draw the Line. Probably my favorite Aerosmith song, Kings and Queens. Love that song. Title track, The Hand That Feeds, just really great stuff on there. That was the 4th album. I think they were really getting heavy at that point, and just great stuff. Second album, Toys in the Attic, another really heavy album. The title track is fucking killer. Big 10-inch record, great song. Sweet Emotions. Walk This Way, I like it, but it's kind of like the popular hit. I can take it or leave it. Sweet Emotions, just a really, really big hit, and I love it. I still, to this day, I still love that song. It has the same feeling to it. Number 1 album for me, Get Your Wings, their second album.
Wow.
I love it. I think that's when they really developed their hard rock sound, honed it in, and just let it ride from there. Let's see here. Same Old Song and Dance, great fucking song. Spaced, SOS, Train Kept the Running, Seasons in the Weather, just great songs all around. And I do like Pump. I'll give special mention to Pump, even though it's a very commercial album. I thought it was really good. Some of the songs on there, let's see. I mean, all the popular stuff. Janie's Got a Gun, What It Takes, The Other Side, Love in an Elevator. All poppy songs, hits, made them millions of dollars, but actually good songs. So I got to give them credit. Even though they went the commercial route, they still had their sound and still produced good music. So solid band, Aerosmith. Just great bands. I mean, a lot of their songs, throughout the rest of the albums, also good. I said I wasn't one that listened to Aerosmith albums on and on, start to finish all the time. I probably listened to more Aerosmith albums in the last 2 weeks constantly than I have in most of my life. Just listening to start to finish, and definitely a great band. So cool.
Thanks for your time, and made you listen to Aerosmith for 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Deep diving into them.
Sometime. Yeah, okay, cool. So James has probably got plenty to say.
I always do, don't I?
He might even make someone in the internet world mad. You never know.
I'm gonna piss some people off. I'm gonna piss some people on the panel off too.
Oh, I bet you are.
So when I was a kid, just getting into music, Aerosmith were gigantic with Permanent Vacation. My sister bought me that cassette. That was the first full-length album I ever owned.
Wow.
And I played the fuck out of that. because it was a full-length cassette. Because before that, everything for me was singles. My parents and my sister always bought me singles. So yeah, Permanent Vacation was my first kind of exposure to them. Watching MTV, all the videos off that, Ragdoll, Dude Looks Like a Lady, Angel, all that shit. And then in my teens, I started getting into digging into their back catalog. I used to DJ for my high school's radio station. And I remember going through the vinyl records and seeing a copy of Rocks, and I stole it. I brought it home and listened to it, and that blew me away. I was like, this is the same band that's doing fucking Love in an Elevator? How is this the same group? Like, it blew my mind that they could be so dirty and raw and, just a completely like heavy sounding band. So I started digging into the old stuff, and I, like Denny, am going to cheat, and my number 3 record from them is going to be Live Bootleg. This is definitely a killer, amazing live representation of Aerosmith, and it really doesn't go past the Rocks album, which I like, because there's honestly, at my age now, listening to their stuff, there's nothing past the Rocks album that I dig. I don't like Permanent Vacation no more. I've tried to get back into it. Pump, Get a Grip, all those albums that were big when I was a kid and knew them as a kid. I don't like none of that stuff no more, man. I've tried. I've really tried stuffing those albums back in my ears, and I just can't get into it. It just comes off as so like silly to me, like the Ragdoll thing and Love in an Elevator and that terrible sappy diabetes inducing song they wrote for the soundtrack for that terrible space movie that they did. It's just awful.
What song is that? Don't want to miss a thing.
Yeah, that dumb bullshit. Ugh. So yeah, I can't get into that later stuff no more. And it's for me, it's all about the old 70s stuff, right up to Draw the Line. To me, Draw the Line is that's the last one I could sit through anymore. And I hate the album art to that. I think that might be one of the top worst album covers in the history of rock music. Personally.
Have you seen the new Deep Purple album cover?
Yeah, that's pretty terrible too. And the one
great
before
album,
the one before was the Infinity logo.
Yeah, and now you got a -1.
Yeah.
Doesn't make for great concert shirts.
It certainly doesn't. So that's my 3, Live Bootleg. Number 2 is the album that I stole when I was a teenager.
Steal that album.
Rocks. So there's nothing bad about this one.
No, it's not.
Every track is just so nasty. And oh my God, nobody's fault. If you never heard the Testament cover of that, I love Testament's version.
Yeah.
The only time it really lets up is Home Tonight, and not for nothing, that's a decent ballad too. I like that song.
Definitely.
Years later, I wound up getting Slash's autobiography, and a cool story about this record with that. He said he was going to a chick's house one night to try to score, and they wind up having a few drinks, and he goes through a record collection and finds this. He puts it on the turntable, and he was so taken by what he was hearing on the record that he just sat by the turntable and kept flipping the record over and over again. And she's looking at him like, dude, are you just going to sit and listen to my records all night? And he's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm taking this record home. And he wound up just leaving her laying there and waiting and brought this home. And it makes a lot of sense because when you listen to this, you hear a lot of Slash's style that he copped in this.
Yep.
So,
Oh yeah.
gotta love it. Rock's my number 2. My number 1, nobody's mentioned it yet. The debut.
Cool.
I fucking love this album. It's
Make it.
not very far between this and Rocks for me, but I reach for this one a lot more. Another one, just there's no bum songs on this. There's no dull moments. Even the cover of Walking the Dog is amazing. Moving Out is so good. The main riff in Moving Out is so good. Make It, great opener. One Way Street, Write Me is one of my favorite Aerosmith songs of all time.
Good record.
And I first found this when I was like 13, 14 in the $4 cassette bin in Caldors. I grabbed this because I knew Dream On and I knew the GNR version of Mamakin. So it was cool to finally bring this home and hear the real version of Mamakin.
Yeah.
And that's, this is my number 1 for me. With the following album, with Get Your Wings, to me they took a step backward. I thought this album was incredible, and I thought Get Your Wings was kind of just okay. You know, there's songs on this album like Seasons of Wither to me is a throwaway track. I feel like Spaced is a throwaway track, but there are great songs on it. I'll give it an honorable mention. But to me, the debut, it don't get no more raw. It don't get no more street. This is like a real street record, man. It's just good stomping the pavement rock and roll, man. I don't know why they never kind of just kept that going. They got so commercial and turned so just pussified.
They met a producer and a record label wanted to get more commercial. That's went on with a lot of bands in the early '80s. A lot of AOR, right? Look at 38 Special.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot we could go through.
I always felt like with these guys too, they have the moniker of greatest American hard rock band. And to me, there's no way Kiss is the greatest American hard rock band compared to these guys. For me. Yeah. I'm sure some Aerosmith super fan is going to want to decapitate me in the comments. Go ahead.
Someone might say Leonard Skinner.
Yeah.
You got a damn good point there.
But yeah.
So honorable mention, Get Your Wings. Yeah. Honorable mention, Toys in the Attic. You know, I hadn't listened to this one for a long time until today. And I'm happy I did because Uncle Salty, I forget about that song. That's a really cool track. It's got like a cool bluesy, lazy swing to it, but the main riff is really nasty. A good song that nobody really talks about. And I'm sorry.
It sounds like it should be on the first record. Uncle Salty sounds like first Aerosmith of it.
It sort of does. It sounds like early stuff. And I'm sorry to Ed. He said he likes Big 10-inch Record. I think that's the corniest song in their catalog. Oh my God. It reminds me of like the Warner Brothers frog with the top hat twirling the cane going, hello, my honey. It's just, it's so disorienting in the middle of the record because the first 4 songs are great. And then this weird, like,
comic relief.
You know,
it was more like a backstage invitation, like publicity stunt than anything else.
They should have left it backstage.
It's like AC/DC's got the jack. They got 10-inch.
Yeah. Leave it backstage.
And Black Flag has the song "Who's Got the 10.5" by Black Flag.
Yeah.
So I read that
Steve,
Slash,
you may have gotten. You may have gotten some of those.
I read that.
What's that?
Go ahead, Ralph.
Ralph, go.
Oh, I read that Slash book too. Read the Steve Perry book, but in one of the two books, I forget which. I looked through in here and tried to find the pictures of Slash with Joe Perry, but one of the books they talked about how uh Slash ended up getting a guitar that Joe Perry had to sell early on, and then Slash gave him the guitar as a present. I forget. I
Yeah,
guess it was in the Slash book. I couldn't remember if it's in
it's
the
in
Slash book
Slash's
or this
book.
book,
That's
but
right.
that was just another connection.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I
no
got it.
I
doubt.
was gonna say, Steve, you talking about the big 10-inch record? It was probably been 20 years ago now, just about maybe, or 15 or so. They did a greatest hits record or something, and they put a promotional only big 10-inch record of just that song on a 10-inch record. You probably got some of them. They were promos only.
Yeah, might remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where was we talked a lot about the Aerosmith live album? A couple of you guys had it in your top 3. Where was that recorded? Refresh my memory.
All different
Multiple-
places.
That was all
multiple
different places.
locations.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. I kind of forgot. No.
I think Side Tree Live was done in '73 in Boston. Like it
Yeah.
was an older.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in a bar somewhere.
When did that album actually come out?
77,
1978.
78, 77.
That came so that came out after Rocks.
Yeah.
After Draw the Line.
It came out after Draw the Line. Yes, it
Yeah.
did. That's right.
Yeah.
And the promo single that went along with that was Chip Away the Stone. And
Yeah.
that's one of my top favorite Aerosmith
Great
songs.
song.
Great song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic fucking song.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that guitar tone on live bootleg is just like, I don't know what the fuck it was able to get that tone.
I'm gonna
It's
listen to
so
it at work
crushing.
tomorrow because I did not listen to that album as part of my homework, but I touched it today in my record rack. I'm gonna play it tomorrow when I go to work. Cool.
Do it.
So Tony Dio, I guess we'll go to you and then I'll wrap up the album listings here myself.
Okay, so Aerosmith for me, I wasn't really into Aerosmith growing up in the 70s. I don't recall many of the friends that I had that were into music really into Aerosmith. I mean, it was Kiss and Ted Nugent and Boston and ZZ Top and stuff. But I remember seeing the records and stuff. So I really didn't get into them until later when I started buying, starting a cassette collection of my own, say, in the early 80s. And I think the first thing I purchased was the Aerosmith's Greatest Hits. And probably not long after that, probably, I don't know, maybe a year or so later, you started hearing Walk This Way everywhere because of that Run DMC remake or whatever. And I'll say that's what revitalized their career. That's what started them over in the 80s. I mean, because everybody knew it, and it made Joe Perry and Steven Tyler's known faces on MTV, because Aerosmith had some videos. I remember they made videos all the way back into the 70s, but the only thing I ever remember seeing on MTV when we first got MTV around 83 was they would show the Lightning Strikes video. That was always kind of in rotation, which I love that song. It's a great song. But yeah, when they got the Run DMC thing happened, it revitalized. I mean, John Kalodner picked them up, tried to clean them up in rehab and put out Done With Mirrors. And there's some good tracks on there, but it just didn't take off. And then Permanent Vacation comes out and it's exploded from there. And I do like Permanent Vacation. I think it's a pretty good record, some good stuff on there. But I later on, probably somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, I started, getting into the Aerosmith catalog, getting into them. And there's so many just, nooks and crannies in their albums, stuff that wasn't on Greatest Hits or stuff you just don't hear on the radio. So my top 3 records, I'm going to start out with number 3. Mine is going to be Get Your Wings for number 3. I love this one. I mean, Same Old Song and Dance is great. Lord of the Thighs, I mean, one of my favorite tracks. One of the I think the first time I ever went to see Aerosmith, and that was in the 90s. It might have been probably was the Pump Tour or something like that. I don't even know. And we had really good seats, and they played Lord of the Thighs in the set, and people started sitting down and going to the restroom and get a beer. like it's just a new song. Nobody knew it, and they played a lot of the more popular stuff. But me and my 3 friends were up rocking out. We loved it. We thought it was great. But yeah, it's good stuff on this record, and I do like "Season as a Winner." I think it's a great song.
Excellent.
Train Kept a Rolling, that's just a classic. So my number 2, I'm gonna go "Toys in the Attic." Just another solid record all the way through. Toys in the Attic, great, opening track, title track. But I love Adam's Apple. I've always liked that one. Sweet Emotion is one of the best grooves ever in rock and roll. Just a great track. I love No More, No More. Round and Round's great. And You See Me Cry is even, this is a great ballad.
It is.
And number 1 is definitely what some of the other guys have said, Rocks. Just the best Aerosmith album for me. Back in the Saddle, Last Child, Rats in the Cellar. So many good tracks on this. And Nobody's Fault, of course. Licking a Promise. Sick as a Dog. Just so many great songs. For honorable mention, I would throw in Draw the Line because, like Ed said, Kings and Queens is probably my favorite Aerosmith song. Just love that track. And I remember when I got the Greatest Hits as my first record, that was one of my favorite tracks that I kind of kept rewinding and playing that one over a lot. It was just different than anything else on the album. But yeah, great band. It's sad to see them call it a day, but Steven Tyler, he could have gone out and used backing tracks and got through the tour. I commend him for not doing that. There's a lot of people out of work because he can't perform. That's a big organization. That's a big tour. I have a friend who's Brad Whitford's tech, and so he got to pick up work somewhere else. And they've been on hold now for like 2 or 3 years, about this tour, whether it's going to go or if it's going to start or what, and so but I have to commend him for having the guts to say, yeah, I'm not using backing tracks. We're not doing that, because nowadays, if he did it and he missed something the first night, it's going to be on YouTube the next day and everybody's going to talk shit about him. So he might as well just go ahead and hang it up, and who knows? They might do a one-off or something every once in a while, maybe for a charity event or something, but they've had a good run, and it's sad to see these bands go away, but they got to hang it up sometime,
Yep,
for sure.
And they can still record too, right? It's not like they might still end up like recording stuff because
maybe so, but like I don't care anything for their later records, so they can just leave it leave it at what they've got, Yeah.
All right, cool. So I guess I can give you my top 3. I didn't bring my props on with me, so I'm just going to read them off. It's tough. This could change in a day or two, but especially the 3 and 2. I'm going with the self-titled for my number 3 album. James talked a lot about this already, but I thought "Make It" is it's a great song to start the record off. I dig the One Way Street. It's really bluesy. Moving Out, Moving In, man, that's such a great jam too. And there's a lot of classic rock that I get played out on. I never get sick of hearing Dream On for some reason. That'll go with Sweet Emotion too.
Yeah.
Walk This Way, I definitely get played out on. Maybe it's because I had all that extra love in the 80s that you guys talked about. But yeah, that album, I can listen to it still all the time. And I listen to sometimes like 70s on 7 or classic rocks on X Sirius sometimes at work when I'm busy doing stuff. I'll just put the radio on. And man, if I hear Dream On, I'm still looking forward to hearing it. So number 2, I would have never went this way years ago, but what I was listening to last week or so, I'm going to go with Draw the Line for my number 2 album. Even though James doesn't like the album cover, maybe he won't buy the t-shirt if he sees it then. But that was a tour I saw. Maybe that's why. But the song Draw the Line to kick it off, it's another great album starter by Aerosmith. Kings and Queens, Get It Up. It's got that little funky kind of bass thing in it and funky beat. And Critical Mass is a freaking heavy tune also. So I'm going to go with that for my number 2. And number 1 is going to be Rocks. It was my absolute favorite by them. I had that little 8-track portable boom box. I guess I don't know if it's a boom box or now or not, but it was a little square thing, had a handle on the top. It looked like a TNT detonator back in the 70s, and I had that 8-track stuck in the side of it, skipping school, hanging out with all the heads in high school, all listening to Aerosmith. And I still remember like hanging out in the neighborhood by the school, like probably sitting on somebody's lawn, listening to Aerosmith, thinking it was cool back then. So I could call it a perfect album. I mean, it kicks off a Back in the Saddle. Doesn't get any better than that. It's got Last Child. It's got Rats in the Cellar. It's just killer, killer, killer. Like Combination, I think is one of the best songs. I love it. How the secret, the thrill of it all, or whatever. He found the secret. It's all what the song's about. I really don't know. I was digging into the lyrics a little bit today as I was listening to it, and of course, Nobody's Fault. And of course, someone already mentioned that Testament covered that song, and it's just such a great record. That's the one I go back to the most. I might as well cheat and keep going. I can talk about some shows and I'll let Denny kick around and we'll talk about that. So shows I can chat about. The first was my first big stadium show gig I ever saw was at the Giant Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It was August 6, 1978. It was in support of the Draw the Line album. I went with 3 of my high school buddies. And I still remember getting lost on the way down there. It was one of our first like big adventures, like getting kind of far out of our radius of town. I was driving my 340 Plymouth Duster, we had our souped up cars. And I remember getting into this parking lot, and being around all these like it was like that 70s vibe of these festivals or whatever you want to call them, concerts, and just it was something as close to being something like Woodstock as a kid growing up, like a big, how many people are going to be there? 80,000 people were there. And one of my memories from this, probably no one else on this panel was at this show, but getting in the parking lot and hearing echoing out of this big cavernous football stadium was the Godzilla shriek. They were literally playing the Godzilla movies that they used to show on whatever channel 11 or something around here. So it must have been like a Sunday, and they were literally playing a Godzilla movie, and you could hear this just like echoing, and you could hear it in the parking lot.
That's great.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then of course we get inside. And of course, they were playing the Godzilla movie on the screen, and the smell of weed, and the people. We were up in the nosebleeds. I'm not gonna lie, we were kids. We just got into the show, and we didn't have money to sit down on the floor or front row. We did move down towards the floor later on in the show, but there was a guy sitting right behind us, had a US-2 water pipe, pulling it right in the crowd. I mean, you don't see that anything. Another thing from 70s you don't hear about nowadays, firecrackers and fireworks. People would bring firecrackers into the shows.
Yep.
Like,
Wow.
I went to a Pocono Downs jam around that same time, and Nugent was there and a bunch of other bands, and they were literally throwing like not bottle rockets, but the
M80.
M80s.
M80s.
And people
Yeah.
were getting hurt, breaking bottles. It was a rowdy time for rock and roll. But the show was opened by a brand new band named Journey. They were the opening act.
Nice.
Nice.
And then it went into the amazing Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush, which
So good.
I was totally into, probably almost as much as Aerosmith going to that show. They were tour that I had the Tales the Unexpected record. I think they were touring off actually the live album. actually,
Yeah,
for this one.
probably.
That was the
Yeah.
one that was close, but I believe the studio one before that was Tales from the Unexpected. He put on a killer set. And then Mr. Ted Nugent came out and completely destroyed the place.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of people don't think about Ted Nugent, especially in 2024. But if you were around in the 70s, he was on top of his game. And
Yeah.
he was out there shooting fucking flaming arrows and doing everything. And he really, as much as this is about Aerosmith, he stole the fucking show that night. Aerosmith was a
And
little disappointing to us that night, actually, as we watched that show. People said that they were really wasted that night, and you could kind of tell. But that was they called them the Toxic Twins, and I do have the set list from that night. They opened up with Helter Skelter, then they went into Rats in the Cellar. I Want to Know Why. They did the big 10-inch record for the fourth song. Sight for Sore Eyes was song number 5.
Nice.
Walk This Way, Walking the Dog, Chip Away at the Stone, Seasons of Wither, Licking a Promise, Sweet Emotion, Lower the Thighs, Get the Let Out, Get It Up, Draw the Line, Same Old Song and Dance, Toys in the Attic, The Milk Cow Blues, and they ended the set with Train Kept a Rolling.
Nice.
That was probably the encore. Overall, it was an awesome experience. I then saw them here at Orange County Fairgrounds in Middletown, New York, which is our local fairgrounds and speedway. They were supporting the Rock and the Hard Place album on the Back in the Saddle. They called it the Back in the Saddle tour because Joe Perry had just came back and the other guy that had left, and it was like a reunion show. This was on July 5th, 1984. It's one of the first concerts that were held here at the fairgrounds. They did a couple the year before. I think the first one they did at the fairgrounds was like Charlie Daniels with this promoter and Greg Allman, which I went to with my dad. The set list from this one was Back in the Saddle, Mama Kin, Bone to Bone, the Coney Island Whitefish Boy, big 10-inch record at number 4, 3 Mile Smile, Reefer Headed Woman, Lord of the Thighs, No More, No More, Get the Let Out, Last Child, Red House. They did a Jimi Hendrix cover. I kind of remember it still. Lightning Strikes. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Same Old Song and Dance, Dream On, Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, Milk Cow Blues, Toys in the Attic, and they ended up with Train Kept a Rolling. It was a hot, humid, July day. Thunderstorms rolled through the show that night. And while the lightning strike song was playing, lightning was actually striking during the performance of the song. And people that are from the area that went to that show still talk about that night,
Nice.
like how it was actually a thunder and lightning storm playing during lightning strikes. I also saw them there with Guns N' Roses as the opener, August 7th, 1988. That was on the Permanent Vacation tour. I don't remember if this was a gig or not, but they played at the fairgrounds a couple times. And I think this was a gig that they banned the sale of beer and alcohol at the fairgrounds because supposedly the story was that they were on the wagon and the promoters was not happy. The people I know that have the concessions were not very happy, and we were not very happy about it either, because we had to go in there and stay sober all night. And I think the last time I ever saw them was July 19th, 1990. Maybe that could be the dry. That might have been it because Guns N' Roses, and I don't know. My memory's hazy, but Guns N' Roses was the opening act of the Permanent Vacation. That's the only time I ever saw Guns N' Roses. This was at the Middletown Fairgrounds, and Guns N' Roses were just getting hot as heck right then. They were on fire. They were opening up for Aerosmith, and the place was absolutely packed. One of the biggest crowds I ever saw at the fairgrounds. And then I saw them again on July 19th, 1990, which was the Pump Tour with the Black Crowes supporting them. But one of those ones, they wouldn't let us have beer because they didn't want to drink beer, it seems like kind of crazy, but I knew the concessions. It wasn't like, like the Meadowlands or Jones Beach where they just say, hey, you can't have alcohol at metal shows. This was a band decision. So
Hmm.
we were all a little bummed out. I think we were a little mad at we were a little mad at Aerosmith
I
after
bet.
too. Kind of like, guys, I don't know, new albums aren't what we really like, but we're going to the show because it's right here in town. But if they come back and won't let us drink again, we probably won't go see them.
Yeah, if
Hey,
you read
quick comment.
Slash's book, that tour that GNR did opening for Aerosmith,
Okay.
Slash says that they had to hide their drinking
So that must
from
be that
Aerosmith.
must be it then. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
didn't
they
want
had
any
to
of us
hide their
drinking beer in the
drinking.
crowd either. So I'm sure many concession here is probably, we're planning on making how much money do you make selling beer and booze at a metal concert?
Sure.
A lot.
Ralph, were you at any of those shows?
Yeah, well, my first real show was that one at the fairgrounds where the lightning strikes.
Yep.
That was like my first really big concert. Like I went to a couple little things, but
Yeah.
I always consider that like my first concert with Orion.
Orion the Hunter was
The thing I
opening up.
remember
Yeah.
most,
You're breaking up a little, Ralph.
we knew this hole in the fence there. Was that? I was
You're,
breaking up.
you're talking like Charlie Brown's parents a little bit.
Uh, um,
But we started to hear
Whatever.
you said something about a hole in the fence. Go ahead.
Yeah, we knew where this hole in the fence was, and we would sneak into all the shows there, like 38 Special and Night Ranger, and
Yeah.
even Huey Lewis and News, whatever was coming through, we were getting in for free. But I remember the thing about the lightning striking, but mainly I remember being a little kid. I was 14 years old, and just watching drunk people like flopping all over the place in the mud and stuff with the rain and stuff. Like it was almost more about people watching than like the show. I remember looking up at Steve Tyler and seeing like the bandanas and stuff around his mic stand and stuff. But a quick thing about what you were saying about Ted Nugent, in this book with Joe Perry's book, he talks a lot about being like best friends with Ted Nugent, and in between tours he would go to his property and hunt. He was a
Oh,
big
wow.
time hunter, and he
Nice.
learned a lot from Ted. And he talks a lot about it's kind of weird combination because he was such a drug addict and Ted was so straight, but they had hunting in common.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talking about it. Every time he could, he would take a flight out to where Ted lived, and he would hunt on his land and everything. But yeah, that was the only time I ever seen Aerosmith. And in the later years, I regret that we could have went maybe 10 years ago where the prices were normal still, and my wife had never seen them. So I kind of wanted to go. And then when they
So-
started talking about these last few tours, the
So,
prices
Ralph,
were just
what
so
happened?
outrageous.
Ralph, what happened to the hole in the fence for Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith? You said you didn't go back and see him.
Oh, by then couldn't get. I was listening to Autopsy and Death.
Oh, yeah, by then you were
I
done.
wouldn't be caught dead. I wouldn't have been caught dead at that show. I was once I got immersed into that, I could give two shits.
Hey.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of good shows that I missed right 5 minutes from my house.
Yeah, you even
because I
said you
was
didn't go to
so into
Priest
the-
because I remember an episode.
Yeah, I didn't go to Priest. I didn't
But
go
I
to a
remember
couple of those-
now you talking about the hole in the fence because we did an episode a couple summers
yeah,
ago
fairground.
about the fairgrounds in general, and we had Brett Hearn on, who's a guy that's actually running the racetrack again now, but he was the general manager of the races, and we were talking about concerts. And he, at the end of it, he was like, "I guess we're gonna have to go look for that hole in the fence, make sure it's held up because they were
I
actually."
told him not to worry. I told him not to worry no more because I dig tunnels now. I told him, I said the hole doesn't matter now. I go under. I'll pop right up right under the fucking chili dog stand.
That was an episode we
So-
did about the fairgrounds when they had that new management there, which are gone now, unfortunately. And they were promoting, like when they brought Cheap Trick in that summer. They brought a bunch of bands in, but unfortunately it all went away again. But anyhow, we're way off subject, but we're talking about the fairgrounds.
That was my first Zoom. That was my first Zoom with you, Steve. Steve,
Was
that was my
it?
first Zoom with
Yep,
you.
yep.
That was the first one I did with you. It was the local. Yeah, it was the local.
Sorry, well, I went out of turn, Danny. So you're actually next, and you can tell us about your concert experiences. But Aerosmith, did you I don't know if this is gonna get naughty or not. Did you take any of their girlfriends away or wives or?
I got a lot of story about Aerosmith, but I'll stick to two stories. The first
Well,
time I saw
maybe
Aerosmith,
three.
no, two. The first time I saw Aerosmith was January 10, 1980 at the Montreal Forum. Um, and I was 13 years old. No intelligence, no knowledge, no experience. Perfect recipe to do everything wrong in one night. So, we of course we went to the department store, wait in line for tickets. We were there like super early because back then that's what you did.
That's what you did, yeah, yeah.
And so got tickets 10th row right in front of Aerosmith. Dude, couldn't like I got the cowboy boots on, I got the bell bottom jeans, I got the freaking belt buckle. I'm fucking looking cool as shit. I have no idea what I'm about to experience in that fucking arena. So we go there. The first band on, I gotta talk about those guys because the opening band was Tease with a Z,
Oh boy.
from Canada. One of the heaviest Canadian band at the time. If you listen to the album on the loose, you gotta listen to that record. There's like country songs in between some of the most crushing metal songs you can hear for that time period. But anyway, so Tease is opening for Aerosmith, and two, three songs in, they start a freaking brawl on stage, and I'm talking like so the
Wow.
drummer jump over his thumb and start like punching the bass player singer behind the head, and then and then the roadies come in, and instead of like trying to separate them, there's like two groups of roadies going at each other. Um,
Wow.
so the two songs in is there's like 5, 10 guys on stage like fighting, and then they go away and they turn on the lights on and they start playing like PA music, and we're like, what the fuck is going on? And then some guy comes and like, these will be back shortly. So anyway, they came back and played the show, and they all like bleeding, like all like like bleeding and cut and like fucking like, puffy eyes and stuff. And we're like, what is this? Best performance ever. Like because the bass player said in the mic is like, like we're like brothers, you know what it is. Like sometimes we don't get along. So
Wow.
then Aerosmith um, came on, and I was there to see Joe Perry, and there was no internet back then, no newspaper, like barely news. Well, there was newspaper, but no rock band news and things like that. And here comes Jimmy Crespo and Rick Duffy on stage. No Brad Whitford, no Joe Perry. So I don't know. I don't know if it because like Tease started like the festivities, but freaking riot at the Montreal Forum because Joe Perry and Brad Whitford is not there.
Wow.
Huge brawl inside. People start fighting, trying to rip off the chair off the floor.
Oh, shit.
People fighting with each other, like security getting punched in the face. And Steven Tyler kept saying, like, guys, we'll play the show. Like Joe Perry, Brad Whitford are not here. We have Rick and Jimmy here. They're gonna do a great show. The people like were booing almost, and they sounded horrible. Like
Wow.
I needed to wait for the chorus to recognize the song. Like, and even then, sometimes it was just like, you should not be confused if they're playing Draw the Line or Back in the Saddle. Like, um,
No.
horrible show, horrible performance. We ended up having our jean jacket ripped, and uh, we just fought people for like at that point. I think it was just the team of the night, but
Wow.
it was an horrible show. And yeah, I'm sure they cut the. I'm pretty sure they didn't play all their songs. Like when I
Wow.
look at the set list, like on like Concert Archive and shit like that, it
Yeah.
says like, well, I don't think it happened. I think they played maybe 7, 8 songs, and then people were not happy, and we were not expecting that it was not going to be Joe Perry and Brad Whitford. So probably a kind of a shock, like to Steven Tyler, to see the reaction of the people. Like we wanted to see Aerosmith, right?
Yeah.
We asked for refund, never got our money back, anything like that. Anyway, that's my first Aerosmith experience. My second one, much more pleasant. And I think I talked about that show before, but I had a job. I was working for the CN Rail, like railways up in Montreal, and I wanted to go see Aerosmith, Metallica, Warrant, and Black Rose. So it was a festival outside in the stadium in Toronto, where like the CFL Toronto Argonauts play football.
Yeah.
If you guys want to know, but yeah, so it was there. So I said, screw my job. And they fired me because I left to go see a rock show. Like, it's like a movie. Get to the show. We ended up like, I don't know, like me and a few of my friends, we ended up being like the party distributor of our area. And like our entire section was having a good time. We're having a good time. Met a girl, beautiful girl, started like making out during Dream On, like perfect night. And she never met her before. And then she gave me her phone number, and I kept the paper in my jeans, the little paper. And then like 6 months later, after washing my jeans, like hopefully more than once, I found the paper and called a number. She became my first wife and the mother of my two kids.
Wow.
So I would have never, my two oldest kids. So I would have never like
That's cool.
had my two oldest daughter if I don't find that paper in my jeans. So that was my second Aerosmith, and they were much better. I think it was either maybe like Pump or Permanent Vacation Tour 1990. I don't know if I don't think Pump was out yet, but I think it was
Pump was
Permanent Vacation.
1990.
Yeah,
Oh, was it? Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, they did play Love in an Elevator. Didn't care too much for Warrant or Black Rose sounded great. They had their first album out, but Metallica, the sound was very sounded not good for like a stadium. Like it sounded very like when it's windy outside, the sound sounded like in a phaser through the entire concert. But that's it. That's my two
You
Aerosmith
said it was
stories.
Black Crows opened up, right?
Yeah, Black Rose was actually
So that sounds like
similar.
it might be the same tour that we saw in Middletown, but we didn't have Warrant. We just had Black Crows and Aerosmith on that tour.
Oh yeah, it was Black Rose, Warrant, Metallica, and Aerosmith.
Oh,
And it was
that's right, because you were at a festival, so that tour probably combined with another tour, yeah.
I don't know, but there was like, I would say at least 50,000-60,000 people outside.
So Aerosmith and Black Crows were probably touring and hopped on this big gig. Yeah.
We ended up going to Rock and Roll Heaven in Toronto after the gig, hanging out with the guys from Slaughter and Sacrifice. Had a great time. They were laughing at me. They were laughing at me like, "What are you doing at Aerosmith and freaking Warrant concert?" Well, it was like freaking aggression going like glam now, and they're like, so like same point as Ralph. Like, you listen to Autopsy. What are you doing at the? So yeah, but yeah, it was a great memorable night. And like another reason why Aerosmith means something to me. But yeah, great festival for sure.
Great stories.
Yeah.
Ed, anything?
Cool. Yeah. I mean, Aerosmith, I've only seen them once. That was on the Permanent Vacation tour, and it was a great fucking tour. Don't remember the set list. Didn't look it up, but I know they played a lot of old stuff, a lot of new stuff off that album, and it was just a really, really great tour. Like I mentioned before, Aerosmith weren't like one of my go-to bands. They were just a band that was always there, always reliable. So I never really got deeply into them. So it's the only time I got to see them live, but it was a great show. I remember just
where'd you see it?
This would have been 1988, probably.
No, where?
Oh, either Madison Square Garden or the Meadowlands.
Meadowlands, yeah.
And it was just, I just remember being just a really, really energetic show. Just, I walked out of it just feeling fucking great, just really happy. Like I said, don't remember the set list, but I know they did a lot of old stuff. And it was only the Permanent Vacation album, so they weren't doing all the new stuff yet. And it was just a great fucking show, great band.
Cool.
I had a lot of respect for them after finally seeing them live.
Excellent. James?
Unfortunately, I never got to see Aerosmith live.
Mhm.
You know, I respect their early 70s material, especially because they're such a huge influence on Guns N' Roses, who are my favorite band of all time.
Wow.
So I do respect them. I would have liked to have seen them at some point, but I would have much rather gotten into a time machine so I could go back to the
Yeah.
fucking Rocks tour to go see him back then. Because seeing him, when I was old enough to go to shows, I wouldn't have wanted to sit through Ragdoll and Dude Looks Like a Lady and Love in an Elevator and, having to go take a piss 17 times to their set. And so I never had the urgency to like, oh my God, I have to go see Aerosmith. I believe there was in sort of recent memory an Aerosmith Kiss tour that I would have loved to have gone to. But again, I probably would have wound up, during several songs going to buy a Kiss t-shirt and grabbing a beer and taking a leak. And, they're just not a band that I've ever really like loved. Like I respect their early stuff, but there's
Yeah.
so many other hard rock bands from even that same exact era that I love so much more. So I never got to see them. I remember the day that the announcement for the retirement came out because I was in Boston seeing Metallica the night before, and I had a god awful experience in Boston for that at the beginning of August, going to see Metallica
Mhm.
because the traffic going to that show
That's right.
was
You ended up missing bands.
I missed Wolfgang Van Halen completely, and I missed most of Pantera because I got to that awful stadium up there in Boston, and there's no signs telling you where sections are or anything. And I'm up there with all those terrible garbage Boston people with their awful accent.
Oh,
And it took forever to find our section, and we finally sat down and heard the last three Pantera songs, and Pantera sounded terrible. Whoever was running their sound should be shot and then buried and then dug back up and then hung and then buried again.
Wow.
I hate Boston. So when I woke up and saw that Aerosmith had retired, I was in I hate Boston mode. So I left. So there we go.
So you didn't
I don't
buy
give a shit about Boston. I
So
don't give a
wait a
shit
minute.
about Aerosmith.
So you didn't buy a Patriots jersey?
I should have gone there with an Eli Manning jersey on.
Steve Tyler's originally a New Yorker. He's
But
from
anyhow.
either
No,
Bronx
I
or
know.
Brooklyn.
I
forget.
know he's from Yonkers. A buddy of mine's mother used to go out with him back in the day.
I
The band is based from that terrible city.
I have heard the story about Pantera on the road with Metallica and not sounding up to par, not more than once too. So, where I got to see Pantera headline by themselves, they sounded great.
Right.
But anyhow, that's a whole nother subject for another story.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so Tony Dio, what do you got to say? Wrap this one up.
Basically the time I mentioned when I was talking earlier, I think that's the first time I saw them, and that was in the 90s, mid 90s sometime. And I worked shows for them, and probably 5 or 6 shows for them since 2000.
Okay.
And so I was able to see, parts of the show and you know, I'd see the guys hanging out and stuff. The only one little cool story I remember, one night I work as a runner, so I'm running errands for the bands and stuff. And I was going to go to the production office for something, and they were Aerosmith's getting ready to go on stage, and I think all the band members were on stage except Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. Joe Perry comes out, and they told us, like, security's like, stop, they're going on stage. So I'm like standing here, and there's probably about 6 other people standing in the hall besides myself. We're just kind of, we had to stop so they could come through, of course. And Perry comes out. He's got his guitar on. He's got a cigarette in his mouth. He takes the cigarette out. He takes a draw on it. Here comes Tyler, comes up behind him and like hits him in the back. Let's go do this. Like, you know, two brothers, you know, let's go rock, you know. And when he did that, he just threw the cigarette butt down, stepped on it, and off they go on stage. And everybody's standing here, everybody's quiet. And I just pointed at the cigarette butt and I went, eBay dibs. And everybody started laughing.
Yeah.
Then you got to prove it was Joe Perry's cigarette, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool,
so that's
man.
my Aerosmith story, live show.
So to our viewers that are still watching, if you're still watching us, I love you. You watched the whole episode. So thank you for watching the whole episode, not just the first 5 minutes. So anyhow, for everybody that's watching at home, please mention your favorite Aerosmith albums, your favorite Aerosmith moments in the comments. And thanks for watching the Rock Fantasy Files, and Tony Dio and Denny and James, Ed and Count Ralphus. We thank you all for your time. We gotta find Ovi. He's missing.
Yeah.
We gotta find our good buddy Miles too. He's been missing.
Yeah.
Levin.
And Steve Levin, according to Denny, has turned into some kind of a superhero.
Oh, yeah.
Very
wearing
busy.
a watermelon
Crimes.
melon
Fighting
head.
crimes.
If you
Fighting
talk
crimes all
about
night.
some kind of like, not deathcore, what is it, slam metal, he'll come on now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he'll come on. So I guess we'll see you next week here on the Rock Fantasy Files. And if you're in the Middletown area this weekend, there's a show at Quinn's Pins with Morpheus Descends, Disma, and Malignancy. It's going to be this Saturday
Nice.
in Middletown. So come out and support the show if you're in the area. Thank you. All right. I will talk to you guys soon and on the Rock Fantasy Files. I can't talk well tonight.